Everybody, my name is Brad Latham. I'm a professor here at the University of North Georgia, and I am the chair of Northeast Georgia DSA. This event is co-sponsored between Northeast Georgia DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, the largest socialist organization in the United States, and the UNG chapter of Students for Progressive Society. Josh McCall, unfortunately, is unable to make it due to an illness, but Tim rules, and I'm sure the event will be very good. Stick around afterwards if you want to chat. There will be a question and answer session after the talk. And also, Northeast Georgia DSA is having our next general meeting on January 27th at Little Italy Pizza in Gainesville, Georgia, for anybody who might be more interested in the group. If you're not sure whether or not you're interested in the group, check out some of our literature or any of our websites and anything. So without further ado, here is Tim Faust. Oh, yeah.
Hi, y'all. Pretty good. Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank y'all for having me. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Northeast Georgia DSA, SPS also. Thank you to Emma. She's your favorite filter because of Whip's ass. It's insanely dope. It's the coolest thing my name's ever been on. I do it. Which is why it's so cool. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Tim Faust. I'm a member of DSA, a resident healthcare policy person. I've been traveling the U.S. talking about single payer, what comes beyond that, kind of the constant health justice across the U.S. Did about 30 stops across the Midwest and the East Coast last fall. Now I'm on Southern Georgia, which is important, right? Because what healthcare looks like in the South is what different health looks like out in the East Coast, in the Midwest, and the North world, right? I'm going to give my little talk, a little half-hour long thing. We'll do a Q&A. If you have views, I'm happy to give it. If you don't have views, I'm here also to do research, right? I really want and really need to learn what healthcare looks like, coast to coast, plains to Gulf, right? Because the peculiarities and the particular perversions of healthcare and justice across the U.S. really vary from coast to coast. So if y'all are talking about things that are happening here or elsewhere in the state, I'd love to hear it. That's the shit that I'm here for. I'll surprise my girlfriend to take notes. I'm booked up already. That's not what I'm getting out of the meeting over 2 weeks. Also, in the interest of disclosure, the job I'm part-time on doing this stuff is in the insurance industry. I do work in insurance as a data person, which is why I hate insurance. I want it nationalized, and this is my version of atonement for this thing. So if that bothers you, I'm happy to talk about it. But let me tell you, there's a whole lot of comrades inside the industry who's happy after that conversation. So with that out of the way, I want to talk about healthcare in the U.S. Hopefully you do that. Otherwise, we have there's not a lot else I could talk about. Maybe a world championship wrestling. Those are a few things. I want to talk about what we have in the U.S., what we want instead, what must come next, and what we all can do instead. Right? I want to talk about the overwhelming and numbing brutality of for-profit healthcare. I want to talk about the relatively benign structural changes that we demand instead. And then I'm going to talk about something that can write a broader vision of a better world, right? A moral urge toward health justice. Sound good? Fantastic. Let's start talking about what we have now, right? I want to start off by confirming something you probably already feel in your bones. You're being fucked over. Now, the method by which you are being fucked over, or the severity or complexity, or the artfulness of the cover-up varies from person to person. But fundamentally, we have created a world in which you are made sick, punished for being sick, and then someone else makes a profit on it. Let's talk about why. By and large, the costs of receiving healthcare are much more than any individual person can afford by themselves. But in the U.S., not a lot of folks need healthcare in a given year, right? In the U.S., 50% of all medical costs come from 5% of the population. 80% of all medical costs come from 20% of the population. And the population is fungible, right? Costs move around from year to year. When they hit you hard. Some years you get hit by a car or have a heart attack or have a cancer scare, and some years you don't. And so if everybody had to pay all of their own costs out of pocket, eventually millions and millions of people would go into crushing debt and medical bankruptcy. Not a guess. That used to be how healthcare was all funded until the 1880s, when a bunch of socialists and a bunch of unionists and a bunch of doctors insisted that letting people go into crushing debt and poverty because of illness was not just, that we shifted to a new payer model, the idea of insurance. Now, insurers are organizations or companies that receive revenue by charging you monthly premiums. When somebody gets sick, insurers spend the money they collect from everybody to pay a portion of those healthcare costs, plus keep a profit for themselves. So the more revenue an insurer receives from customers, or realistically, the more subsidy it receives from public money, the wider those costs are spread, right? And the lower an insurer's per person costs. That's called a risk pool. So if an insurer has too many sick people in its risk pool, for example, if they get one person who has hemophilia, which can cost up to $1 million a year to treat, its costs increase. And so to compensate, it increases premiums. But when premiums go up, customers that can't afford to pay them drop out. Except, of course, for customers who can't afford not to pay them, sick folks. So they stay on. So per person costs keep going up and premiums keep increasing. This whole thing is a big, stupid, vicious cycle that nobody can afford. Thus, an insurer wants as large and as healthy a risk pool as possible, or it wants to find ways to kick out sick customers or coerce them into leaving by, for example, dropping the kinds of drugs a sick person might need. There's a big lawsuit in Florida about that. So the task of an insurance company is to make sick people, as much as it can, other people's problems. That's what we say, or that's what we mean when we say we live in a world in which healthcare is a commodity, right? Because future's on your heart, and future's on your lungs, and your chance of getting diabetes, and whether or not your meatball's glaucoma gets worse before she turns 65 and goes on Medicare, are fiddled with and speculated about and bought and sold for profit by private companies. Over time, we've delegated the responsibility of providing insurance to employers. Well, that's messed up too, because that results in the status quo of total employer domination, in which your access to things like contraception, or blood transfusions, or hormone therapy are determined by the whims of your employer. But if you aren't lucky enough to have an employer, right, if you lack the better skills to get the finite number of better jobs, you're left behind. And so the people who profit from the modification of our bodies have decided it is acceptable to shackle the well-being of children to whether or not their parents are lucky enough to have gone back in time 40 years, learned to code, and found a benevolent employer. Welcome to the hell world of America 2018. Now, it gets worse, of course. It's much too early to talk for things not to get worse, because the costs of healthcare keep increasing, and they increase much, much faster than inflation. Now, these costs have been increasing since we first began recording them back in the 1880s. Part of that's good, right? More folks are living longer with chronic conditions. Diabetes, cancer, heart attacks, trauma aren't the immediate death sentences they were even 2 generations ago. So that's a great way to spend more money, taking care of people longer and longer into their life. But a lot of these cost increases, in fact, most of these cost increases are because hospital CEOs and pharma companies, close personal friend Martin Shkreli, keep finding ways to charge more and more money for the same services, or rack up fees for unnecessary services, and no payer can stop them. Here's how it shakes out. In the US, the average inpatient procedure costs 40% more than the exact same procedure in France. The costs are high because the prices are high. Or look at, for example, MRIs. You know MRIs? MRIs are big fancy machines that bring money. And in the US, an MRI procedure costs 5 times what the exact same machine doing the exact same procedure costs in Australia. But most egregiously, let's look at the relationship between primary care and hospitals. Primary care, things like checkups, basic medications, the kind of familiar health care you get from your GP or family physician. It's high volume, it's low margin, by and large, it's not super profitable. Now, conversely, a hospital gets paid an average of $2,000 a night for an inpatient stay. So we witnessed this thing called Romer's Law, which is the idea that hospitals will change their admission policies to ensure that every hospital bed that exists is filled regardless of actual need in the community, right? So if you're a hospital CEO, it makes a lot more sense to push folks into inpatient admission instead of wasting your time letting them get cheap primary care outside the hospital. Now this means diseases will be caught late, if at all, and people get sicker and sicker and thus more and more expensive to treat. But if the hospital's getting paid and the hospital's specialists are getting paid, everybody's happy. Except, of course, for the 58 million Americans who live without access to primary care, of whom 28 million live in the South, and 20% of people in Georgia with access to primary care. And so as you can see, there are 2 fundamental truths to American health. One, if you are a payer, like an insurance company, it is not profitable to insure people who are sick. 2, if you're a provider, like a hospital, it is extremely profitable to charge sick people as much as possible, as late as possible. And so upon these two kind of jagged rocks, we have built the Church of American Healthcare, in which the body is valued solely as a source of profit. Now, this whole situation scares the bejesus out of everybody involved, particularly the payers, right? Because payers are interested in finding ways to mitigate rising costs. Often that means just refusing to pay for claims altogether. Before the Affordable Care Act, and still today it's for employer-sponsored plans, it means that payers will often refuse to cover people who are likely to get sick. You all know the phrase pre-existing conditions. But this still isn't enough to bring costs down. So we all in America got together in the 1970s and invented the idea of consumer-driven healthcare. It's the idea that we should make consumers, which is just a libertarian way of saying people, pay more for the costs of their own healthcare, right? Because once people pay more for the costs of their own healthcare, they'll turn into smart shoppers. And through the power of the free market or whatever, they'll shop around and not get unnecessary or too expensive care, and find the cheapest ER in the county if they get hit by a car, or like help their surgeons. And all of this together will drive prices down. You just internalize the language of the oppressor. And all this just builds to an atomized, unambitious, and honestly pretty lonely world of what healthcare is, and what healthcare can and should be. It treats being sick or being poor, being able to get pregnant as a character. And that means that if you get hit by a car, or you give birth to a premature baby, or you get rabies, you're on the hook for your own costs because it's your responsibility, because healthcare is a transaction and a matter of personal accountability. If that accident, or if that illness, or if that pregnancy forces you into a lifetime of crushing debt or medical bankruptcy, so the hospital, a pharma company, or your insurer return a profit, well, tough. That's the breaks. Consumer-driven healthcare only serves the people who seek to extract profit from our bodies. What's worse than that? It doesn't even fucking work, right? Because people who are forced to pay for their own healthcare costs just don't seek healthcare if they don't have to. They don't seek primary care. They don't seek preventive care. So they ignore that rash, try not to look at that growth, or think away that chest pain. Because we demand they bear the burden of expensive healthcare costs, people turn their bodies into ticking time bombs until they have a heart attack at their job and leave their kids behind. So what do? Right? How do you square the rampant increase of healthcare costs with the fact that fundamentally it's just not profitable to insure sick people? Well, the Democrats, you collaborate with the Heritage Foundation to offer us the Affordable Care Act, which is at its core the massive subsidization of private industry with public money. The ACA is a big bargain, a plaintive wail. Please, 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 how many billions of dollars do we gotta give you so you stop getting sick people off their insurance? Now, the ACA had some successes. First and foremost, the expansion of Medicaid. Where Medicaid was expanded, we saw a 6.1% decrease in the mortality rate. That's 11.1% among communities of color. The reasons for their obvious, right? These are folks that have been systematically and violently denied access to care in the first place. So even extending Medicaid, whatever meager care that offers, does a hell of a lot real fast to extend people's life and accept the basic decency of healthcare. But at the end of the day, costs still keep increasing. Quality of care stagnates for the most vulnerable among us, and 28 million people are still uninsured. I think as of yesterday, 31 million people are still uninsured. Thus, the ACA has failed in its pursuit of health justice. So here's the table stakes, y'all. Among so-called developed countries, America is the most dangerous place to be sick. Among peer countries, America is the most dangerous place to be black, the most dangerous place to be pregnant, the most dangerous place to be a child, the most dangerous place to be a woman, the most dangerous place to be gay, the most dangerous place to be old, and the most dangerous place to be disabled. Last year, life expectancy at birth fell for the first time in almost 30 years by a tenth of a year. Think about that. 4 million people are born a year, and across those births, that's a theft of 400,000 years. But a funny thing happens when you look at these stats, right? You know exactly what I'm going to say. It's woven in the fabric of the American culture. When you look at these stats more closely, you realize that all this danger only exists if you're poor. Because rich people are exempted from all these problems. Men born in the wealthiest fifth of all Americans get to live 15 years longer than men born in the poorest fifth. Among women, that gap is 10 years. This is war. This is the terrible secret of American healthcare. They are killing us and robbing our forces. More on that in a second. That's what we got. That sucks. What do we want? This big, stupid, multi-payer, profit-driven Rube Goldberg machine of American healthcare is failing us today, and left unchecked will collapse tomorrow. So instead, away with it. We demand a federal, universal, single payer. Now, single payer is a pretty simple concept, or it's a pretty benign transformation. So having a bunch of insurers, a bunch of fragmented customer bases, each one seeking to avoid taking care of unprofitable sick people, we have one publicly owned, publicly funded insurer with a legislative mandate to cover in full all care for all people. That phrase, all care for all people, is particularly important. Not just Medicare, but improved Medicare, merged parts A, B, and D, for all people, which offers comprehensive coverage, including vision, medical, dental, for all people in America, also including long-term care, that is free at the point of service with no cost sharing whatsoever. Here's how it looks in practice. Right now, if you want to go to the hospital, or you call a clinic, schedule an appointment, the first thing you're asked, even before what your name is who your insurer is. That's because providers are afraid, and I think reasonably, of providing services, especially expensive ones to provide, without guarantee of reimbursement. So even before we can be considered for care, we have to answer, well, on who's dying, who's paying for this. We have constructed this giant brass squid, right, that gets between us and our providers and hates us and flops around, and it forces doctors to spend half their day filling out forms to justify their work to insurance, and nurses to spend a quarter of their time adjudicating claims and seeking authorization for service from insurers. Under a single payer system, we starve that squid, we kill it. The question of who's paying for it is answered. It's Medicaid. We preserve and protect the provider-patient relationship by eliminating the question of, well, how can a patient afford this? Because everybody benefits when accessing care is affordable or free and easy, right? Because delivering care, right, being a doctor, being a nurse, being a provider, that's fucking hard. It's complicated. But paying for it is simple. And in fact, we're already paying for it. We're just forced to spend that money really, really stupidly. American public money right now pays for 2/3 of all healthcare costs in the U.S. Half of that 2/3, aka 1/3 of all costs, is actual Medicare, Medicaid, or VA spending. The other half is direct government subsidies to private companies. Now, the remaining third is out-of-pocket costs, additional tax you pay to insurers for premiums, deductibles, and copays. And so the goal is to reallocate this spending to take care of everyone in the long term. And even before that happens, we free up all the money associated with administrative costs and profit seeking within the private insurance market. This optimization, in their terms, this innovation opens up, in our conservative estimate, an additional $370 billion a year, which is a pretty big chunk of change. What do we do about the money saved? Well, we use it to improve everyone's standard of living. We build, or more realistically, reopen primary care clinics in rural areas. We fund community health centers in poor neighborhoods, and we return the money to the labor that does the work. Take, for example, you all know home health things? They're like a sick parent or a sick kid or a sick loved one. If you're at the hospital, it costs an average of $2,000 a month, right? Often a whole lot more. But sometimes you receive the kind of care that you need, basic management, physical therapy, or whatever, at home. Home is great. Home is where your dog lives. Home is where the computer lives. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper. So we've got 1.2 million home health aides, and they're billed at an average of $153 per hour. So in theory, everybody wins. Well, except of course with the home health aides themselves, because on that $153 visit, they're paid an average of $11 an hour. So we can allocate this money to do what the private market refuses to do, which is pay fair wages for essential care that helps everyone. Right now, your private insurer only bears the cost of you receiving care right now. Because they're going to change insurers in the future, eventually go on Medicare, they don't actually feel the pressure providing with care that keeps you healthy in the distant or even near-term future, right? Instead, we all do, because we all suffer when our friends and family get sick and our public money is allocated to care for folks in times of crisis. This isn't really a complex idea. I think you all know this already, right? Because, for example, you all know that if your window was broken, cold gets in, right? And if a cold gets in, you get sick. And if you get sick or your kid gets sick, you gotta go to the doctor. And if the community clinic is shut down or it's booked solid, you gotta go to the hospital. And if the hospital is far away or you don't have a car, you gotta take the bus. And if you have to take the bus, you have to spend all fucking day dealing with the bus system. If you spend all day dealing with the bus system, you can't go to work. And if you can't go to work, you can't afford to fix the window that caused the problem in the first place. And so the answer is not to fork over a pile of cash every time you go to the hospital. The answer begins with fixing the goddamn window. But there are no private actors in the American model who will bear responsibility for fixing the problems on their own, right? Because the insurance industry is incapable of addressing the foundational problems of American health, of fixing the broken windows, of fixing the broken septic systems in rural South Carolina that have led to an increase in bookworm in the exact same way that a billionaire is incapable of lessening income inequality, or a cop is incapable of shrinking the prison industrial complex. Insurers cannot fix this injustice because they have been constructed by and within that injustice. They cannot solve these problems, and they will not solve these problems because they existentially cannot conceive of them as problems in the first place. But we can, and we do. And so it makes perfect sense that the same actor who sucks when people don't get care, which is all of us united, represented by our federal government, should be the same actor that pays for that care in the first place. Because once the federal actor bears the costs of providing care, and also the risks and costs of not providing care, it can finally be used as a tool for realizing health justice. Here's what I mean. If your people are getting sick and dying, they don't have a place to live, or a place to live where it's safe, full of pollution, full of mold or flammable, you know, the Grenfell Towers in the UK or ghost ship in Oakland, then housing is healthcare. And you must build free or subsidized housing to bring healthcare costs down. If people are getting sick and dying, instead of have access to healthy food to eat, and so they're getting diabetes or comorbidities like cardiac failure, then food is healthcare. And you provide people with affordable or free food options and the time, space, and materials with which to prepare them to bring healthcare costs down. If your population is getting sick and dying that have access to needle exchange programs, therapy, or counseling, then rehabilitation is healthcare. And you build full cycle addiction treatment programs. Not our current end-of-life palliative care worship, but the full social safety structures required to help people handle addiction, or perhaps not choose it in the first place to bring healthcare costs down. Because the single payer is only the tool, right? Health justice is the actual goal. And when we fight for health justice, we all fight side by side, because economic justice is health justice. Reproductive justice is health justice. Environmental justice is health justice. And justice for Black lives, justice for trans lives, justice for the lives of immigrants, and the well-being of all people, regardless of age, gender, race, or creed, that's health justice. We have inherited a world in which you have permission to receive health care, right? Capital's allowance you to be safe in your own body is dependent upon how much an insurer can extract a profit. And thus we have permitted in our country utter desolation. Without our consent, we have been forced to participate in the condemnation, criminalization, and abandonment of people in need. People with disabilities have to spend tens of hours a week pleading with insurance companies for a chance to go on a waiting list to maybe receive the bare minimum of care required to keep them alive. That's if they're lucky. The unlucky ones get up with Medicaid or Social Security to maybe consider compensating their partners, friends, or parents a whopping $1,000 a month for taking care of them full time. Elsewhere, the opioid epidemic, which is originally manufactured as a package which employed with a giant marketing campaign attached to it, now kills 180 people a day. People it doesn't kill are written off as criminals, because only criminals use drugs, and so they're written off as criminals, the untouchable, left to rot as their children cry their names, right? Because in life, poor and uninsured people are used to test the drugs that are then just turned out and sold to insured people, and their certainty continues in death, because uninsured people's organs are ripped and sold to insured people's organs to wealthy people as transplants. Because there is no end to the body horror of capitalism, and there is no line too far for the modification of the body. America has cheered the privatized slashing and burning of social structures and then has the audacity to punish people for struggle. When people are in need, we waste time, effort, and money means testing, separating the worthy from the unworthy among those who need help and then stigmatizing them instead of guaranteeing the basic decency of health equity. This is cyclical. It has happened forever, and it will continue to happen forever as long as we tolerate, even in whispers, the idea that the body is a commodity. Because for systematically marginalized people, sick people, homeless people, people struggling with addiction, people with disabilities, poor people, pregnant people, trans people, women, and people of color, well, while there's no way for the medical industrial complex to find profit in their bodies, there's always the private prison system ready to receive them for profit. And so single payer is not the revolution. It is just our first counterattack in the war that has already waged against us. And it is the tool by which subsequent counterattacks are made possible. It is not only the only reasonable method of controlling healthcare costs while guaranteeing coverage, it is the tool by which we force ourselves and the state to reckon with the racist, sexist, and classist provision of healthcare in the country and to begin to strive toward relief, the articulation of health justice. My friends, single payer is moral. Single payer is necessary. And single payer is achievable. Solidarity now, solidarity forever. I keep adding more portion to this topic. That's the bummer portion. That's what we have, what we want. That's what we can do right now, right? What we all can do, right? We stand on the shoulders of the labor movement, of hundreds of thousands of nurses, of tens of thousands of doctors who have demanded a clear and focused vision of the future. That insurance is not healthcare, and that healthcare is something a just nation affords its people. And so we must build the popular movement which begins by demanding single payer from our government and continues to demand health justice in our nation. And people tell us that we're bringing about creating socialism, that we're rejecting the American capitalist way of life. We say, yeah, go, and keep on fighting. How do we do that? With that shoulder to shoulder, right? The idea of health justice affords us the understanding that we are fighting for a continuous spectrum of demands, right? And unlike liberal incrementalism, successes at any point along the spectrum, which offer material benefits to people now, make success downstream much more now, right? And so the ways DSA locals across the country take on this fight are many. In Austin, they're running for guaranteed paid sick leave, first in Austin across the rest of the U.S. In Maine, the Maine's People Alliance organized and won Medicaid expansion in the state. In Burlington, Vermont, running for universal state-funded primary care for all people. In Louisville, they acknowledge that unaffordable and unsafe housing is forcing healthcare costs. They're petitioning to get a big chunk of money from a soccer stadium to build affordable or safer housing. Elsewhere in rural Indiana, I'm trying to organize transit networks, direct service getting folks to and from clinics they need. Up in parts of Brooklyn or in North New York, we're organizing with federally qualified healthcare centers, Medicaid clinics that need a whole lot of work and are the primary gateway to people's healthcare, particularly poor people. So all those options are out there. Just pick the battle that makes sense to you, go out there and win it. Right? Because healthcare is a national fight, like I said before. Health needs and health justice is local. What healthcare looks like in Burlington, Milwaukee, or Pittsburgh is different from what healthcare looks like, health justice looks like in Atlanta, Gainesville. And so what healthcare looks like in Gainesville, right, is different from healthcare looks like in the rest of Georgia, right? For example, this is what, Hall County? Is that right? Yeah. This county is in the top 10% of all counties in Georgia by health, right? But 40 minutes away to the east, you've got Franklin County, which is the bottom third of all health outcomes across the state. Actually, look at health outcomes in Georgia, it matches pretty closely to rural and urban populations. In urban areas, you have hospitals. In rural areas, you have none. So all of a sudden, the further you get out into the sticks, the sicker and sicker people get, and the less access they have to get. So this popular, what healthcare looks like even in the same state, in the same fucking half-hour drive, long drives. In the South, a quarter of the population is denied access to basic primary care. Half of all people in rural areas don't have access to healthy food, and 8 of the people have diabetes. And all this means, in aggregate, that the South has been robbed of 115 million years of life, which is fucking insane. I caution you that it's presumptuous for any of us to believe we can guess the actual health care needs people around us, right? The stakes of the single payer fight are much, much different. If you're somebody who's spent dozens of hours a week trying to get basic for your needs, or to deny care altogether. And thus it is our obligation to go around and extend the basic decency of showing up, right? Going to people around us, listening, asking questions, finding common ground, and then putting our shoulders to the wheel. Because if we fight with people today, they will fight with us tomorrow. We build solidarity today, so that tomorrow we can build power. This is a fight we will win because we must. And the tide of history is in our favor. Right now, Medicare for all polls at 64% positive nationwide. This is not a radical proposition among the people in us. So my friends, the single payer is inevitable once we make it inevitable. People like Max Baucus, this progressive luminary, think single payer is inevitable. I don't want his program, I want our program. Health justice is inevitable once we make it inevitable. I am so, so grateful and so, so proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. That's it. Solidarity now, solidarity forever, solidarity all. That was one. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? It's a totally open floor. Yes, you first.
Hey, I'm Brian. I'm a nurse at a regional medical center nearby. And we, again, not only do these HIPAA rights, but we have patients we see routinely because they can't get primary procedures like dialysis or cardiology or something else. In the community where it would be much, much cheaper. So we admit them in the hospital for an overnight stay to get what they need, and then we send them home. Next up, we go on a first name basis. And it's crazy because, as you said, that's the most expensive way possible to do it. And as a taxpayer, I'm one of those lucky people with a good job and the insurance stuff. I'm going to pay for it, and I would just like to pay for it as cheaply as possible.
In Chicago and Orlando, you see examples of hospitals acknowledging this problem, right? Because at a certain point, it becomes a hospital's cost to provide care with defense, right? If they're a Medicaid person, hospitals are not going to be reimbursed. So now all of a sudden, hospitals are going to get to the game. They want to reduce utilization rates for fewer people, so there's folks that go to the hospital to nowhere else to go. So in Illinois, for example, University of Illinois hospital spent, I think it was like $200,000 and bought or rented housing for 26 most treatment lives and saved $2 million in healthcare costs. In Orlando, the exact, they saved $1 million. In Orlando, they spent $1 million and saved $2.5 million. The exact same thing, right?
This is
a hospital, because at some point, because the hospitals bill, if someone comes to the hospital and they're not getting paid for it, right? If you're a hospital and I'm a Medicaid patient, I'm going to be over and over again, at some point, if you're spending more money on these than you're getting into Medicaid. So it becomes.
What did they spend the money for?
Just buying little apartments. Renting apartments, rather, right? Because
they weren't home.
Yeah, you get way sicker. Pardon? Sorry? Oh, sorry. You die of exposure way faster than cancer, right? And so, just like with jail, people that go to jail most often, people that get arrested for being homeless, they go to jail, they get out, and the homeless, they go to jail again. It's going to be hospital, right? People that actually, with very little amount of money, can be taken care of appropriately and pretty decently, are instead of racking up a bunch of costs because it's in no one's incentive or no one has the bandwidth to pay for their care in the first place. We're seeing that now in Chicago and in Orlando, in small spaces for super expensive quality. And you're right, people that otherwise would be receiving primary care more cheaply, more efficiently instead have to go through the machine, and ultimately the taxpayers pay for it.
We continually see people, we don't have any place to sit. It's not a safe discharge. I cannot just discharge somebody to the street where they're going to get what they're happening. Was recently a video online where a lady was discharged out in the 30-degree weather.
Yeah.
And the hospital did that. I want him or her nursing license back. And I was so ashamed of that. And we don't have anywhere for them to go. They take them to the hospital. There are people in the emergency room. There are people in the post-anesthesia recovery area that need that bed, but I can't get to them because this person doesn't have anywhere to go. All that costs money.
And we used to have a more robust in America network of like rural healthcare providers and primary care clinics, but they were closed or they were shut down. Here's a couple things. I was up in Marquette, Michigan, on the Upper Peninsula, really rural area, very pretty. I used to go ice fishing when I was a kid. Population, I think 12,000 or whatever, and there's one hospital in Marquette that serves a 3-hour radio population. Right? There used to be health clinics, they all got shut down. And now nurses are working 18-hour shifts, and nurses have ratios of, I think, like 30 to 40 patients at a time, which is insane. So they went on strike. Actually, that's how the Marquette area DSA hometown and picket line of the hospital. And the reason these clinics were being shut down is the hospitals were buying them up and saying, oh, it's not very cost efficient shutting down. But at the same time, if all of us together wanted to go solve the problem, right? The only fused bodies would be one really cool person to go work in rural primary care. Better hope we're born rich, because med school costs $300,000, hundreds of $300,000. Primary care doesn't pay a whole lot, particularly rural primary care. And so your only option really is to go into hospital care, being a specialist. In fact, the AMA, which is the cartel that kind of set prices and Medicare reimbursement, has gone so far as to put on their various committees one primary care and 14 ophthalmologists. They skew prices up higher and higher. So part of health justice, the thing I'm interested in is demanding free medical care for abortion programs. Because there's no, right now we're short of primary care providers. And that problem will not be solved as long as only the children of doctors and the doctors themselves. Well, the reality is, it's not
hello, my name is Curtis, and it's really weird to hear my voice, so I'm going to try to get over it. First of all, thank you so much for coming. I feel much better equipped to make the case for single payer now, so thanks. I have a couple questions, but I don't want to monopolize the time, so I'll just start with, I hear a lot about single payer, national versus state level, so I'm just wondering, do you see potential in doing it on state level, and what characteristics of a state would make or break that?
I'm two minds, like two things. By and large, state-based single payer is stuff to fail. States are inadequate to handle healthcare costs. There are some exceptions, maybe New York, maybe California, because they have really big tourism budgets. But long story short, like the primary way a state raises money is through kind of income tax or consumption taxes, but on healthcare, they would have to income tax. People get sicker when they have less employment. That's not all down. When there's therefore, when there's less employment, less income tax, healthcare costs increase. So you're at a place where you have a shortfall, right? If you're a state, you can't deficit spend because you signed an amendment in the 1980s or something. He's saying you can't, and you can't print money. And you don't have like the F-35 to cut from, so you got to cut from schools or education or roads or healthcare, or if you're Texas, all in ones. And so therefore you kind of build a program that is inadequate to handle itself, right? Also, like there's a bunch of things in the way of the state being able to do a single payer program. One, it would need three kind of federal exemptions. One, you need SEMA Vermont, Trump appointed, or I guess Trump appointed Administrator of CMS to approve Medicaid and Medicare grants for use of single payer. She won't. You need the Senate and House to approve exemptions to ERISA, letting them handle self-insured plans, which they certainly won't pass. And there'll be a lawsuit, lawsuits. You get the Supreme Court that will go into that as well. And I think that all those three things, for a program that's not set up to really succeed, is a lot of rigmarole and on the federal level. Feds can print money if they want to, which isn't even ludicrous. Even noted preliminary Alan Greenspan said that Social Security will go into debt and put more money to take care of it, and be fine. Which is true. And feds also have programs like F-35 or Afghanistan that can pull money from to spend on their costs in short term. So I am not super keen on states that lead. However, if you are in a place where they do make sense, I'll give you something to join it. They are a great thing to organize, right? Because in California, they were organizing for state single payer with a very clear stipulation that when they wanted was federal single payer, it's also the need to get, and that's a transferable, I think, constituency, right? I can talk to you and say, well, we want a federal single payer, I think this is the way to get there. If it doesn't work, keep on moving flag. People are smart to go with it. I think a lot of times the state-based argument is viewed as people like Nancy Pelosi to kind of shirk their responsibility for fighting back the problem capital and federal level. And I think that if there were a state program that failed, it would be used as a thing to point to. Yes, we can have a federal level, but they're not similar. So they're dog here. Both animals, but they're okay.
Thanks, and shout out to Hometown Hero Tom Price.
What a nice man. Bless his heart.
Okay, I don't know if you've heard of these, but what are your opinions on charge masters?
Oh, you like hospital sheets? So, I mean, I'm not sure what my opinion is. Like, I don't know how they're using what I said, but even what's my opinion?
Like, what do you think about the over financialization of just everything in medical?
Oh, gotcha. So, basically, so this kind of goes hand in hand, right? We've got, I'm gonna go, make sure that, I'll ask you to answer your question. We'll roll this for a second. Right now, you have a hospital, and the hospital's primary job is to bill as much as possible for as little as possible to get as much money back, right? So you have massive billing departments whose job is to, for example, find the most expensive kind of knee surgery you can possibly categorize your knee surgery as and bill that to your insurance. A lot of these kinds of items are set by Medicare, which because of negotiating for that, 44 million people kind of get some pricing power. They put out a schedule. That's given up to all the hospitals. Medicare says we'll pay you this much for this kind of care, which is a single payer review. Hospitals take that bill and increase it by $3 or $5 and give that as a sticker price to insurers. Then increase that by 2 or 3 hours and that's the sticker price for kind of walking off the street, right? It's all of a sudden, instead of like the idea of getting treated for an episode of health, you have a bunch of different like line items, everything from gauze, alcohol, and however much time, like the concept of anesthesiology in general. And all this like really just builds bureaucracy that is then used to find ways to extract as much money as possible from an adversarial party, which is the insurance company. Because insurers negotiate on behalf of like maybe tops 100,000 people in a given area, they don't really have any pull to say no to that, right? Because the hospital can say either like, here's our ball, either you play with it or we go home. Blue Cross can't say, we're going to build our hospital. The hospital has its own power mechanisms. Medicare, however, does get to set the rules of the game, right? Medicare gets to say, here's what we are going to pay you. If you do not want to receive this amount of money, you use not Medicare. And no hospital can afford to do that because Medicare is so many people. A single payer gets to set the prices. As de facto pricing power by being legally diagnosed and right. There are some exceptions where I'm kind of concerned. For example, in Pittsburgh, you have basically one hospital that I go to. So there's like some question marks around that. But by and large, like one of the reasons single payer is so cost efficient because they get to set prices. This entire infrastructure of like Medicare price plus like the insurance jacked up plus like the charge master, like question of that, and like all the big billing stuff is kind of limited. You've got like different kinds of payment models. I don't want to get too into that. Use kind of a structured behavior. A thing that is sometimes very good, sometimes very bad. Like an example is Medicare put together a thing called DRGs, which are diagnosis groups. So they bill or they pay a flat amount per diagnosis. So for example, a hip replacement in general is $30,000 or whatever, as opposed to paying for all the screws and time, et cetera. There's a flat fee for a bundle services. That is problems in a lot of places, but in general, a thing a single payer can do is kind of set pricing models, which are ways to try to encourage doctors to make good choices, which can be good or bad. You've got the kind of flexibility on the single payer. So this question of like what does a thing cost is a much simpler answer when Medicare for all board is decided. Answer question?
So you said earlier that about 60-something% of Americans favor Medicare for all.
Yeah.
And I thought I read recently that not only like Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and even Republicans cracked 50% or majority of Republicans favor. But yeah, we still have this problem of what really very popular ideas and common sense policy of what people want does not get any attention at all, or does not get any momentum politically, because we have two corporate capitalist parties who are all in the pockets of big money. So that sort of transitions into my ministerial why I'm here. But so I'm with Movement for People's Party, an United States here. And Bradley had reached out to our regional leader, Harold Wolf, that was him. But he was working with the Green Foundation Caucus of the USA. And so we had dinner and I read over it. And we voted, Movement for People's Party voted on it this week, and we overwhelmingly approved, say we publicly support it. Anyway, so what we're doing is we want to build a working class party that is a coalition of progressive, by building a coalition of progressive groups. And so, I'm just getting started now as a state leader for Georgia. I really don't know what I'm doing, but I know this thing that I really believe in that has to be done. So I'm excited to be working with DSA and do more. But that's the only point I wanted to make. I mean, you don't have to respond to it, but just the fact that I do think most people are on board with this. Is like we see it. It's obvious. This needs to happen. But the political power required to get it done is another thing. California, how long have they had a Democratic supermajority and had it on their platform, but refused to pass it? And any time they have the opportunity to do it, they don't do it. Yeah. Yeah, I think.
What is your effect to the majority? That is under Schwarzenegger.
Although, well, yeah, Schwarzenegger vetoed it, but I think, yeah, currently there isn't, and
The leader filled it with
Speaker Anthony Randall just now.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, so there's that problem, there, and nationally. So that's all I'm saying is like, yeah, this is to me yet another example of a widely popular idea, this common sense. This is what we have to do. It is inevitable, and then here we are stuck with, the powers that be. There's two corporate capitalist parties, all in the pockets of big money, not going to do it. So we have to build that political power.
I by and large agree. I have a couple of things that I think make this a little bit, make the fire a little bit hotter as far as single payer goes. One, Republicans keep putting healthcare right in the middle of the window. And the guts are sad. Instead of pointing out Kentucky, y'all heard this, we're passing literacy tests as a way to reduce medications, but these things are so barbaric. And so, the question, single payer has been an issue for 40 years, but now it's put into the discourse. Every single day, people are trying to erode healthcare entirely by articulating a vision of this total massive body war constantly. At the same time, you have Sanders' SAT reform and Myers' 676, which finally you have two bills in the federal bodies that are for single payer. And you've got people that are signing on for it. And of course, they're signing on for I would say, what's for? They're talking, not walking the walk, right? It's politicking, not policy pushing. But at least they have to do that, right? That is a title shift from where it was even 10 years ago, right? And so I think that and also at the same time, this thing is going to explode. Healthcare costs in America are, right now we're spending $200 billion per year in healthcare costs. It'll be $4.7 trillion in a decade under the current healthcare now. This is that whole decline a crisis window where the crisis happens in push policy. And the crisis of healthcare in America, it has not been this bad before. If we keep getting this bad, nothing can solve it. So we are witnessing the imminent collapse. And unlike other kinds of crises, this is the kind of thing which is both massively widespread, but also intensely personal. Right? The crisis of healthcare is felt in your body. It's felt in being afraid you're going to abandon your kid because your leg hurts. It's felt having to quit your job because you can't work. It's a really, really visceral thing. So I think the leverage is there to push this thing forward. Not from the left or necessarily, but I think that there is a sense of urgency on healthcare that can be channeled into a single payer movement that perhaps other kinds of broadly obviously good policies like single payer don't quite have right now because of a series of like, different circumstances. So I agree, I'm not hoping for them to pull a face turn, that's all they do the right thing. I'm hoping we can force them to have no other option, than to do the right thing. I think about the people parties, all this is the right idea, I thought it was good. Cool.
Oh. I mean, my voice travels. So this is your first speaking event, right?
Sorry?
This is your first speaking event on your tour?
No, last time was Charles.
Okay. So I went to the NATSA one about 2 months ago, right? And one of the people speaking was he was in the local, but he was also a nurse. And something you could also talk about in the future at other events is he mentioned this, said that one of the problems with for-profit healthcare is that it's like the only commodity that you cannot consent to. In the case that you're unconscious, what's going to happen? Do they take you to the hospital? Of course they're going to take you to the hospital, even if you don't want to consent to it. So just something to think about and possibly think about it.
Cool, thank you.
Probably go on the night too.
Thank you, sir. Hey, so my other question, I hear sometimes from more conservative-minded people, the idea of opening up insurance markets across state lines. What effect would that have overall? Because I mean, I know it's a bad idea, but like,
yeah. So at best, very little, at worst, horrible. So one of the ideas about writing insurance health across state lines comes with the idea that right now in the U.S., states more or less regulate what insurance has to contain, what insurance is, right? Insurance plans must contain ABC to be qualified to sell in the state. The ACA did a pretty cool thing, which is good now limited, of determining a set of essential health benefits which insurance plan had to have to qualify to be sold in the ACA. For the most part, those things run the states. And so the idea between letting the states sell across state lines is that insurers like Blue Cross can find the shittiest state with the worst regulations. That lets you only have to cover like a dime for every $10,000 healthcare costs. They can take that plan and then sell that plan nationwide. Great, we made the insurance plans cheaper again, but at what cost? You have to push the cost of people who can afford the first place. That's really what the thing of it is. Because now insurers are aware that when insurance premiums go up 30% per year, even with subsidies, people can't afford them. So now all of a sudden, like people are opting out of buying insurance. It's a constrained term, subsidizing private insurance doesn't work out too good. It's predicated on the idea that, oh, like healthcare is buying insurance, that's all it is. We're probably to define the insurance plan. If we find a way to sell really crappy insurance for very cheap, we're saving the risk pool, saving the commodity. But really, it doesn't mean anything. It's a way of shuffling the problem around and pushing it further and further for people that actually have the health problems or have the healthcare. Instead of, it's a way for insurance companies to advocate the responsibility to healthcare funds. This kind of like masks the problem and trade the metric of more folks getting insured for premium, the fact that much more folks can afford shit, even if they have insurance. So it's a non-part.
Any last questions? Yes.
How do you respond, maybe I missed this, but how do you respond to people criticizing the player by saying something like Canada has really long wait times and we don't want that here?
We have insanely long wait times. And if you can't get healthcare at all, your wait times are infinite. Like Chris said, that was a mighty long time. But we do have really, really long wait times. And even like people that get to get healthcare, we have really long wait times too. Boston, for example, and Los Angeles have wait times that are longer than I think like the lower wait times in Australia, which have a pretty robust healthcare model. Like we've got pretty bad wait times in the US. And that doesn't mean that people that don't have to care. Well, man, I like skiing in Canada. I want to go there someday. But I love kind of like talking to Canadians that go like have a child in Canada, have like their bill for childbirth. The bill is like the cost of the cab ride. Then take the cab ride. That kind of shit. I heard that. Yeah, but the whole wait time argument, like a drop in quality of service, might only affect people that right now are getting like the Saudi Prince Gold Platinum plan from the team, right? The goal is to force it to be one tier of care, so that riding on the self-pose. Then I had to, for closing, I have one more thing that wasn't asked, but I do want to talk about, which is, helpful, which is labor on 2 fronts. One, labor as an institution in America, right? Right now, in the 1880s, it was unions that fought for the idea of insurance, right? They saw people go into poverty because medical debts that fucked up. Great. After World War II, once again, it was labor that threatened national strikes and got things like the NHS and healthcare programs across Europe after World War II. Right now, of course, we live in the era of post-Thatcher, the era of post-Reagan. Labor, through no fault of its own, has been suffocated, right, all of America. And so now unions spend most of their time when they're negotiating contracts, negotiating for worse and more expensive insurance. So being free to organize around better contracts, better wages, and more policy. I think labor justice goes pretty far in single payer. Fundamentally, single payer weakens your employer's control over it, right? You have like a shitty manager with a minimum wage job, not minimum wage, has also it sucks. Someone that has that kind of power over your life, over your healthcare, not just something that kind of run on power, not to abuse it, because we would like that single payer weakens your boss control. Then secondly, I want to talk about insurance. I would say all insurance. Fuck that. But like, both Sanders' bill and the DSA things include clauses for hiring folks to work, like retraining labor in the insurance industry to work in insurance, or working on your single payer. I don't talk about those, right? Because single payer demands the hiring of masses and masses of people. One, there's the literal infrastructure, like the cyber tools in handle single payer program, rebuilding claims machines, that's all pretty cool, great. But it's nice. I want to talk about a vision of how healthcare is forced to look under a single payer that I find pretty aspirational and then what use for insurance. Y'all know Matthew Lesker? He's a public access TV in the early 90s in the DC area. He was spent a lot of time in Mark. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Those of you who weren't in your kids, he had this big Riddler suit. There's free money from the government that you are owed. Call my number and buy my book, and I'll tell you how to get free money from the government. This dude's fucking driving force in life. His passion is finding you all the money that the government owes you, or you're entitled to, or whatever. Great, cool. That is a model for healthcare, primary care, must look like for a single payer. That makes sense. There's this, so we all understand the whole like idea of like the broken woman gets sick, that costs up. You know, nice food gets sicker, so the government costs up. There's a model of this happening, starting on the East Coast, now there's a couple of Arkansas too, of a medical legal partnership. Looks like this. There's a Medicaid clinic, started off in Southwest Boston, Boston, and my girlfriend. Someone walks in, Medicaid patient, says, hey, I've got a kid, a 4-year-old kid, and my kid is really bad. And way too young to have respect. And at the front desk is a social worker with a background in that. And they say, oh, okay, well, then you need a doctor. Here, come over to this room, we'll bring over a nurse, we'll bring over a doctor, we'll get the clinical care that you need. But hang on a second. Often, asthma is caused by environmental issues. So what's your whole thing? And the patient says, oh, well, we live in the slummy part of Boston. Like, there's mold in the walls, there's mold in the ceiling. And I have a slumlord, and I can't fight that. And the social worker says, well, we have a lawyer. And there's a lawyer in the exact same facility who walks up and gives the patient, this is a real idea, a form letter threatening to sue the landlord unless the apartment is willing to cut. Because in America, you have a lot of protections and a lot of guarantees for the kinds of things that you can get sick, but you only have access to those protections, you know, the time or the literacy or the means that find them yourselves and fight. Right? Rich people get to hire a lawyer to find the things they're entitled to, or folks don't. And so, right now, in the insurance industry, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people whose job it is, either they're nurses or people like me, to find ways to deny you. Right? We disguise it in different ways, or whatever. Fundamentally, you're adjudicating a claim, trying to find the minimum amount of care you're required to give somebody and scratch off of it. That skill set, we never work. That's the exact same skill set required to find somebody all the kinds of care they are entitled to, and bring them to them. To become a kind of social worker, who connects the legal side of the medical side. And in fact, we're bringing costs down, we need to hire that person in mass.
I know a social worker in St. Louis, Missouri. Her job is to wake up every single day, get into her car, drive an over to a clinic, get into her car, and drive another hour. And find, she works in Strong Start, which is a program for mothers on Medicaid. We care for people until they're born when they're growing kids. So her job is to deal with people that are battling addiction. She calls every single rehab clinic in the entire state, basically once a week, and says, hey, I need to get a room for my patient. I'm going to call it every clinic everywhere. When they get room, it's always like a pretty shitty deal with Medicaid. This person is acting as their advocate, a patient advocate. You got to hire 40,000 more to build more depth. In hospitals, there are incidences where patients aren't taken seriously. They don't look like they know what they're doing. They're poor, they're inarticulate, they can be sick. So doctors ignore them sometimes. Not necessarily out of malice, it's a cognitive bias, not necessarily explicit racism, but it happens. The way you fix that is by having a strong patient advocate who acts on behalf of the patient and challenges doctors and providers to find out what the person needs. These are things I feel are like economically good, but more importantly, morally urgent. It's the kind of labor that does not exist in mass in America. It's the kind of labor that only a single payer can envision, can fund, and a single payer demands. I think that's the future of labor. More just that's my solution spiel. I think it's pretty fun. Thank you guys.
So before we let out, I'm going to say a few brief things about organizing around single payer in Georgia. Do you mind if we slip in one last question? Because I'm going to try to work our friend Josh McCall into this question, who could not make it tonight. And I apologize in advance because the question is about politicians. I also agree with you heavily that electoral work should probably be a small part of the strategy. It's a much bigger fight outside of politicians and politics. But as you know, there's an election of some sort this year, and it's on everybody's mind. A lot of people in Northeast Georgia DSA, a lot of our members are younger, and they're 19 or 20, and they really got no faith in the Democratic Party. And a few older members, such as myself and my wife, really have no faith in the Democratic Party. And we really, for the most part, you know how the story goes, but there is this one local politician, Josh McCall, who was going to be here tonight, but he ended up getting sick for action like healthcare. And he is running on the Democratic ballot line, and he is not a politician of any sort. He is a teacher, and he's still teaching as he's campaigning. And he came to our attention in DSA, actually, from his pretty full-throated defense of single-payer universal health care. And when I first encountered the guy, I had never really heard a Democratic nominee talking that way before. And so we invited him to one of our early meetings in Northeast Georgia DSA right when we formed, and he spoke to our chapter for about 10 minutes. And this video is online. And I was just blown away with his rhetoric about anti-imperialism, just usually the sort of things that socialists talk about. But once again, he's running on the Democratic ballot line, perhaps because that's what you have to do in Georgia. And without getting into the discussion of DSA electoral strategy or anything like that, what would your general overview be, or a few brief words about the aspect of elections and politicians in the fight for single payer?
We need either two things. We need candidates that fight for single payer, or we got to make them ourselves. I think whenever I meet, I've talked to some candidates, I've been endorsed some. Whenever I met a candidate who has a clear and good vision of single payer, with healthcare justice, who is full-throated and ambitious in articulation of it, I'm happy about it. I think that's dope. Not loving electoralism, I don't think he's abandoning it entirely. If someone's running on a thing that I'm passionate about, then I'm fucking amped behind them. So nice Josh McCall, we're going to beat him. We're back at some point. Let's go. I don't know, like, I can't tell y'all what to do, but if you like the guy, then hell yeah, go full call. I'm sure you like a full throttle public call. If you like the guy, go full throttle. That's awesome. Way to go, Josh.
Thank you. So closing out, after this event, we're going to head over to, what's the name of the college? Napoleon's Pizza to have a few drinks and food. If you'd like to join us, just head that way directly after.